They say a heavy brass padlock is the simplest contract ever invented between two human beings. It doesn't ask questions, it doesn't take sides, and it doesn't care about blood ties or family dinners. You turn the key, the hardened steel shackle snaps into the locking mechanism with a sharp, mechanical click, and whatever you leave behind that corrugated steel door is supposed to stay exactly where you placed it until you return. It's basic physical security. A child can understand it. But when a facility manager calls your cell phone at 8 o'clock on a freezing Tuesday morning, his voice trembling so hard you can hear the rattle of his coffee mug against his desk, padlocks and keys have nothing to do with it. That's when corrugated steel and concrete turn into something else entirely. That's when the vault holding your entire life's history is cracked open without making a single sound. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I'm 64 years old. I worked 35 of those years as a senior archival investigator and evidence vault supervisor for the State Department of Corrections. That means I spent my entire adult life managing secure chain of custody protocols, cataloging, locking away, and safeguarding sensitive documents, trial exhibits, physical evidence, and high-value seized assets where one missing ledger, one clipped seal, or one unauthorized access log entry could derail a major felony prosecution or ruin a human life. You get an eye for security protocols over 35 years. You learn that when someone wants to wipe away a paper trail or steal what isn't theirs, they don't break through the front gate with a battering ram under a floodlight. They use a duplicate key, a forged access code, or a familiar face at the front desk when nobody is looking. I thought I knew my own family the exact same way. After my wife, Eleanor, passed away 4 years ago following a long, quiet battle with illness, I sold our sprawling 4-bedroom suburban home and moved into a manageable 2-bedroom stone cottage at the edge of town. But 40 years of marriage, family history, and professional records don't fit into a stone cottage. I rented Unit 114 at Oak Ridge Secure Storage, a climate-controlled, concrete and steel vault facility located 3 miles down the county highway. Unit 114 wasn't just a place where I stored spare furniture or seasonal lawn tools. It held the core of my late wife's legacy and my family's financial security. Inside that 10 by 20 foot concrete space sat Eleanor's antique mahogany heirloom furniture, her late father's collection of rare silver coins, my grandfather's World War II service journals, and a heavy, 600-pound fireproof steel document safe containing my original land grant deeds, tax certificates, and liquid bearer bond certificates valued at nearly $2.4 million. Our daughter, Clara, was 34. She was a senior partner at a corporate marketing firm downtown, sharp, impeccably tailored, hyper-ambitious, and married to a man named Greg whom I'd spent 6 years trying to respect and 4 years trying to tolerate. Greg called himself a private equity wealth advisor, which, near as I could tell from his tailored Italian suits, leased European sports cars, and constant high-stakes talking points, meant he brokered speculative real estate ventures using borrowed capital and other people's life savings. It was a sharp, frost-covered Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. when my mobile phone buzzed violently across the kitchen table. I was sitting in my flannel robe, pouring a fresh cup of black coffee, watching the frost glisten on the back porch railing. I picked up the phone, expecting a routine call from my pharmacy or my eye doctor. The caller ID displayed, Oak Ridge Storage, main office. I pressed the green button and brought the receiver to my ear. "Hello," I said. "Arthur? Is that you, Arthur?" It was the voice of Ray Miller. Ray was 62, a retired county sheriff's deputy who had managed Oak Ridge Secure Storage for 12 years. Ray was a meticulous, no-nonsense man who knew every tenant by name, checked the perimeter fence line twice a day, and kept a strict access log at the front gate. "Morning, Ray," I said, frowning slightly at the raw, frantic strain in his voice. "You sound out of breath. Is everything all right down at the facility? Did a pipe freeze in the corridor?" "Arthur," Ray rasped, his breath coming in heavy, ragged gasps through the speaker. "Arthur, I'm standing in Corridor B right now. Directly in front of your unit. Unit 114. A cold, subtle knot of tension twisted tight in my stomach. "What about Unit 114, Ray?" I asked, setting my coffee mug down on the wooden table. "Did the roof leak?" "The roof didn't leak, Arthur," Ray said, his voice dropping into a low, trembling whisper that chilled me to the bone. I just did my 8 o'clock perimeter walk through the climate-controlled building. The roll-up door on Unit 114 is standing completely wide open. I froze. Wide open. I repeated, my voice sounding flat and distant in the quiet kitchen. Ray, that's impossible. I was down there 2 weeks ago to drop off Eleanor's winter coats. I locked the heavy brass master lock shackle myself. I have both primary keys right here on my desk keyring. The brass lock wasn't picked, Arthur, Ray whispered, the sound of wind whistling through the loading bay doors behind him. It was cut clean through with an industrial hydraulic bolt cutter. The shackle is lying right here on the concrete floorboards. My throat went dry as dry sand. Ray, what's inside the unit? There was a long, suffocating silence on the line. I heard the scuff of Ray's heavy boots against the concrete floor, followed by the metallic echo of the roll-up door rattling as he pushed it higher into its frame. Arthur, Ray said, his voice cracking with pure disbelief. It's completely swept clean. The mahogany dining set, the coin chests, the storage trunks, even your heavy fireproof steel safe. It's all gone. There isn't a single cardboard box left inside. The concrete floor was swept with a broom before they closed the gate. I tapped the screen of my phone and dialed the direct line for Special Agent Sarah Jenkins at the State Bureau of Financial Regulation. Sarah answered on the first ring. Jenkins. Sarah, I said, my voice steady as reinforced concrete. It's Arthur Pendleton. Arthur. Sarah's tone shifted instantly from official crispness to warm respect. It's great to hear your voice. How is retirement treating you at the cottage? Retirement was quiet until 8 o'clock this morning, Sarah, I replied softly. Right now, my daughter, Clara, and her husband, Greg Miller, are driving toward my house in a commercial box truck carrying 600 pounds of stolen estate property, including $2.4 million in bearer bonds, rare coin chests, and my land grant deeds. There was an immediate, sharp intake of breath over the receiver. I heard the scuff of a chair being pulled close to a desk, followed by the rapid, rhythmic tapping of computer keys. Bearer bonds. Sarah repeated, her voice dropping into a tense, highly focused register. Arthur, we've been running a confidential preliminary investigation into Greg Miller's firm, Apex Horizon Wealth Management, for 6 weeks. He defaulted on an $1,100,000 commercial bridge loan on a riverfront development downtown on Friday. His institutional lenders filed an emergency demand for liquid collateral assets yesterday afternoon. He didn't have liquid collateral assets, Sarah, I explained, looking out my kitchen window at the frost-dusted driveway. That's why Greg cut the padlock on Unit 114 at Oak Ridge Secure Storage at 6:20 this morning. He used a forged administrative power of attorney paper to trick a night shift attendant into letting a box truck load my fireproof safe. That's felony grand larceny, interstate transport of stolen securities, and criminal property fraud, Sarah stated sharply. Arthur, does Greg have your signature on an estate release? They're driving to my house right now with a corporate legal advisor, I said. Clara just called me on cell waiting. They want me to step out onto my front porch and sign an estate asset consolidation release before 10 o'clock so they can legitimize the theft before the county land registry office opens. Do not sign a single sheet of paper, Arthur, Sarah ordered, her tone cutting clean as a surgeon's blade. I am contacting Detective Sergeant Richard Vance at County Major Crimes right now. We are deploying a mobile surveillance unit and 2 tactical cars to Mill Creek Road immediately. Arthur, keep them on your front porch until we set the perimeter and deploy the digital audiovisual recording array. I won't sign a thing, Sarah, I said quietly. I'll be waiting on the porch. By 9:45, the morning sun had burned off the frost, leaving a pale, freezing blue sky over the valley. Ray Miller had arrived 10 minutes prior in his private pickup, parking out of sight behind my neighbor's barn down the road. He walked up through the pine line carrying a high-capacity encrypted USB flash drive containing the raw, unedited 4K security footage from Oak Ridge Secure Storage. Got every angle, Arthur, Ray whispered, handing me the drive as we stood inside my hallway. Clear shot of Clara presenting the forged paper at the counter window. Clear shot of Greg wielding the 3-foot bolt cutters on your shackle. And clear footage of 3 hired movers hauling your fireproof safe onto the hydraulic lift gate. Thanks, Ray, I said, putting the flash drive into my coat pocket. Stand by the back porch. At 9:52, 2 unmarked sedans pulled silently into the lower driveway behind the pine trees. Detective Sergeant Richard Vance, a tall, broad-shouldered investigator wearing a dark wool coat over his badge, stepped out alongside Special Agent Sarah Jenkins. They deployed 2 plainclothes officers equipped with directional long-range microphones and body-worn digital cameras, positioning them behind my cedar hedges. At 9:58, the sharp, aggressive crunch of heavy tires on gravel echoed up the driveway. A dark slate-gray Porsche Panamera pulled into my yard, followed immediately by a 20-foot commercial box truck bearing the logo of a regional rental agency. The Porsche parked at an angle, blocking my pickup truck in the carport. 3 doors opened almost simultaneously. Greg stepped out of the driver's seat of the Porsche. He was 38, wearing a tailored navy overcoat over an open-collared designer shirt, holding a sleek leather document portfolio under his arm. He adjusted his silk tie with a practiced, arrogant gesture, looking around my stone cottage with the calculating eye of a landlord inspecting a tenant's yard. From the passenger side stepped Clara, my daughter. My only child. She wore an expensive camel haircoat, her dark hair pulled back into a tight, spotless bun, carrying a red expandable accordion file folder. Her face was pale, rigid, and set in a mask of forced corporate composure. And from the cab of the box truck stepped a third man, a thin, narrow-faced attorney in his late 50s wearing a pinstriped suit, gold-rimmed spectacles, and carrying a heavy leather document folio. I didn't wait for them to knock on the oak door. I pulled the front door open, stepped out onto the porch, and closed the door firmly behind me. I stood at the top of the 3 wooden steps, holding my canvas work jacket tight against the freezing wind, looking down at them. Dad! Clara called out, stepping up the flagstone walkway with a tight, artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're still outside. We tried calling your phone again while we were driving up the highway. I left my phone inside, Clara, I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat. What brings you out to the cottage at 10 minutes to 10 on a Tuesday morning? Greg stepped up beside her, his leather loafers making a loud, damp crunch on the flagstones. He offered a wide politician's smile that glinted in the cold sunlight. Arthur, Greg said, his voice smooth, deep, and dripping with artificial charm. Good to see you looking so sharp. We brought Mr. Sterling from Sterling and Associates. We need to wrap up a quick administrative item regarding your estate consolidation before the county offices open for the morning. The narrow-faced lawyer stepped forward, tapping his document folio. Mr. Pendleton, I have the routine estate asset consolidation release and administrative authorization forms here. As requested by your daughter, this document streamlines local property tax assessments and authorizes administrative consolidation of non-residential personal property items. I looked at the silver fountain pen in the lawyer's hand. Then I looked at Clara. And estate asset consolidation release, Clara? I asked softly, my voice carrying clean over the cold wind. Why would a property tax assessment require me to sign away my administrative rights to non-residential personal property? Clara's artificial smile froze instantly. A tiny, involuntary twitch flickered at the corner of her left eye. Dad, don't be difficult, Clara said quickly, taking a step up onto the first wooden porch step. It's standard corporate language. Greg's firm is restructuring our family trust portfolio so you don't have to worry about maintaining storage lockers or managing outdated paper certificates anymore. Outdated paper certificates. I repeated, leaning slightly against the porch post. You mean the $2.4 million in bearer bonds sitting inside my fireproof safe, Clara? Greg's face didn't just turn pale, it transformed into a flat, gray mask of pure shock. His hand tightened violently around the leather seam of his document portfolio. What are you talking about, Arthur? Greg stammered, his voice losing every trace of its polished, corporate cadence. I'm talking about Unit 114 at Oak Ridge Secure Storage, Greg, I said, my voice dropping into that quiet, steady register I used when auditing high-security evidence vaults. The unit you emptied at 6:20 this morning using an industrial hydraulic bolt cutter. Clara took a sharp step back on the flagstones, her camel hair coat brushing against the wooden railing. Her eyes widened as she looked up at me, a sudden, terrifying realization dawning behind her gaze. Dad. Clara whispered, her voice trembling violently. How do you know about Unit 114? Because Ray Miller called me at 8 o'clock, Clara, I said, looking her straight in the eye. And because I have a 4K digital video file sitting in my pocket showing you presenting a forged power of attorney paper to the night attendant while your husband cut my padlock with a 3-foot bolt cutter. Greg took an aggressive step forward up onto the porch steps, his smooth smile vanishing completely, replaced by a cold, vicious snarl. Listen to me, you old fool, Greg hissed, pulling the red accordion folder from Clara's hand and pointing the silver pen directly at my chest. Your bonds are sitting in the back of that box truck right now. Your wealth management accounts are being consolidated under my firm's administrative authority. You're 64 years old, you live alone in a cottage, and you don't have the legal capacity to fight a contested estate transfer in probate court. Sign this release now, take the monthly stipend we've structured for you, or we file a mental incompetency petition before noon. Clara didn't stop him. She didn't flinch. She just stood on the flagstones, her arms folded tight across her chest, staring at the ground. Sign it, Dad, Clara whispered, her voice cold as winter ice. Sign it now, or we do this the hard way. I looked at my daughter, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged on the kitchen table, the girl whose college tuition I had paid with 35 years of working late shifts in corrections evidence vaults, and I felt something inside my chest lock into place like a heavy steel deadbolt. I'm not signing a single line, Clara, I said quietly. And neither is anyone else. Greg's mouth twisted into a snarl. He reached for my jacket lapel. You stubborn old bastard. Step away from the porch. Keep your hands visible. A deep, thunderous roar shattered the quiet of the morning. From down the driveway, 2 unmarked sedans and a marked county sheriff's cruiser tore around the bend, their tires throwing gravel into the air as they accelerated up the lane. They slammed to a halt directly behind Greg's slate-gray Porsche and the commercial box truck, blocking the driveway completely. 4 officers in black tactical vests bearing bold gold lettering, State Bureau of Financial Regulation and County Sheriff Major Crimes, stepped out of the vehicles with drawn sidearms, accompanied by a mobile surveillance unit. At the head of the tactical squad walked Detective Sergeant Richard Vance, holding an emergency search warrant in his hand, accompanied by Special Agent Sarah Jenkins. Greg Miller. Clara Pendleton Miller. Sergeant Vance's voice boomed through a megaphone, echoing off the stone walls of the cottage. Keep your hands where we can see them. Step off the porch and drop the document portfolio immediately. The megaphone's echo reverberated off the stone facade of the cottage and died away into the freezing morning air, leaving a silence so absolute you could hear the gravel crunching beneath the boots of the advancing tactical squad. Greg didn't drop the document portfolio immediately. For 2 terrifying seconds, his right hand remained frozen, his knuckles turning white as he clutched the silver pen like a weapon. His face transformed from arrogant corporate posture into a contorted, trembling mask of animal disbelief. It's a mistake. Greg shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, panicked whine. We're family. We're consolidating estate assets. Ask him, he's my father-in-law. Step off the porch, Mr. Miller. Hands above your head. Detective Sergeant Richard Vance ordered, stepping past the hood of the lead cruiser, his service weapon held steady in a 2-handed grip. The entire interaction was recorded on long-range directional audio and high-definition video. Drop the folder. The narrow-faced corporate lawyer didn't wait to be told twice. He dropped his leather document folio directly onto the frost-dusted flagstones, raised both hands high into the air, and backed toward the edge of the lawn, his knees shaking violently under his pinstriped trousers. I had no knowledge of the storage unit breach. Sterling babbled, his voice rising in high-pitched desperation. I was retained 30 minutes ago purely to witness a voluntary estate release. I am withdrawing as counsel effective immediately. Shut your mouth, Sterling. Greg snarled, turning his head like a cornered dog. You drafted the asset assignment clause. You took a $10,000 cash retainer out of our escrow account this morning. Keep your hands visible, Greg. Sergeant Vance commanded, closing the distance up the steps. 2 county deputies moved in with mechanical, practiced efficiency. One officer forced Greg down onto his knees on the damp flagstones, pinned his right shoulder, and twisted the leather document portfolio out of his fingers. The second officer pulled his wrists behind his back and snapped a pair of heavy steel handcuffs tight. Gregory Miller, Sergeant Vance read from a laminated card pulled from his tactical vest. You are under arrest for felony grand larceny, breaking and entering a secure facility, criminal possession of stolen securities, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Dad! Clara shrieked, turning toward me on the top step. Her hands clutched against her chest as tears cut clean tracks through her makeup. Dad, tell them to stop. Please. You know Greg. His firm was facing a receivership order downtown. He made a mistake, Dad. He was just trying to protect our family's financial standing. I stood on the top wooden step, looking down at my daughter. 35 years of managing state corrections evidence vaults teaches you that when a thief gets caught red-handed inside a chain of custody breach, they don't cry because they regret the crime. They cry because the door snapped shut behind them before they could carry the loot out into the light. A mistake, Clara? I asked, my voice carrying clean over the hum of the tactical vehicles. Cutting my padlock with 3-foot hydraulic bolt cutters was a mistake? Tricking a night shift attendant with a forged power of attorney paper so your husband could steal Eleanor's heirloom coins and $2.4 million in bearer bonds was a financial strategy. We weren't going to sell the coins. Clara sobbed, her voice breaking into ragged gasps. We were just going to pledge the bearer bonds as temporary liquid collateral for 60 days. We were going to put the safe back in Unit 114 before you ever noticed. A heavy, sickening quiet settled over the driveway. Sergeant Vance stopped reading the Miranda rights for a brief second, looking up at Clara with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. You just confessed to an organized felony larceny scheme on an active state recording channel, Mrs. Miller, Vance said quietly. Special Agent Sarah Jenkins stepped onto the porch steps, holding her digital recording unit in one hand and turning toward the commercial box truck parked in the driveway. Deputies, Agent Jenkins directed, pop the rear roll-up door on that box truck and secure the physical assets. One of the uniformed deputies walked to the back of the rental truck, grabbed the heavy steel handle, and yanked the roll-up door upward into its ceiling track with a loud, metallic rattle-clang. The pale morning sunlight flooded the dark interior of the truck cargo bed. Sitting directly in the center of the wooden floorboards, strapped down with heavy orange nylon ratcheting cargo straps, was my 600-pound fireproof steel safe. Surrounding it were Eleanor's mahogany heirloom chairs, the velvet-lined wooden coin chests, and my grandfather's World War II service trunks. Everything swept clean from Unit 114 2 hours ago. Serial number matches Arthur Pendleton's master inventory manifest, the deputy called out, taking a digital photo of the safe's steel ID plate. Chain of custody intact. All assets secured. A third deputy stepped up behind Clara, pulled her arms gently behind her back, and snapped a pair of steel cuffs around her wrists. She didn't fight. She didn't scream anymore. She just sagged toward the flagstones, her expensive camel hair coat smearing against the damp oak post of the porch, sobbing uncontrollably as she was guided down the path toward the second unmarked sedan. Greg was hauled to his feet by 2 officers. His tailored navy coat was ruined with dirt and gravel, his dark hair plastered across his forehead, his eyes glaring at me with pure, unadulterated venom. You think you won something today, old man? Greg spat, his voice raspy and bitter as he was shoved into the back seat of the cruiser. You're an old fool sitting alone in a stone cottage. You've got nothing left. I've got my home, Greg, I said, looking him dead in the eye as the officer slammed the heavy car door shut. "I've got Eleanor's memory, and I've got my integrity. That's 3 things you'll never own." Within 15 minutes, the driveway cleared out. The unmarked sedans and the county sheriff's cruiser backed down Mill Creek Road, carrying Greg, Clara, and their attorney toward the county detention center downtown. A state evidence transport driver stepped into the commercial box truck, turned the ignition key, and backed the vehicle out of the yard under police escort, taking my fireproof safe and Eleanor's mahogany furniture directly to the state's secure impound vault for formal cataloging and release. Ray Miller stepped out from behind the pine trees, holding his encrypted flash drive, and walked up the porch steps toward me. "Got every single frame of the arrest on high-definition video, Arthur," Ray said, tapping his jacket pocket. "From the second Greg threatened you with the incompetency petition to the moment they popped the roll-up door on the box truck." "Good work, Ray," I said, offering him a firm handshake. "Come inside. I'll pour us a fresh cup of coffee." We sat in the quiet kitchen as the morning sun warmed the room, listening to the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The house felt vast, clean, and completely still. The storm had passed, leaving only the cold, bright clarity of the truth behind. My phone on the kitchen table chimed softly. It was a text message from Special Agent Sarah Jenkins. Greg Miller and Clara Pendleton Miller held without bail pending formal arraignment on grand larceny and property fraud counts. State Financial Crimes Unit executing search warrants on Apex Horizon Wealth Management offices right now. Fireproof safe and contents cleared for immediate release back to your possession tomorrow morning. I set the phone face down on the wooden table, picked up my coffee mug, and took a slow, warm sip. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt the quiet, heavy peace of a man who had spent 35 years managing evidence vaults. A man who understood that when a foundation is tested by greed and deceit, you don't weep over the broken locks. You stand your ground, you protect the chain of custody, and you let justice finish the record. The legal machinery of the state moves with a slow, grinding precision that no corporate marketing polish or leased luxury sports car can ever evade. Once a chain of custody breach is documented in 4K digital video and verified by a physical evidence recovery inside a commercial box truck, the investigation doesn't stop at the stolen padlock shackle. It pulls back the curtain on every financial transaction, every shell corporation, and every forged signature trailing behind it. Over the next 4 weeks, the quiet routine of my life in the stone cottage was punctuated by the steady arrival of official summonses, process servers, and forensic accounting teams working alongside Special Agent Sarah Jenkins and Detective Sergeant Richard Vance. Greg Miller's boutique wealth management firm, Apex Horizon Wealth Management, LLC, collapsed into immediate, court-ordered liquidation within 48 hours of his arrest on my front porch. When state and federal financial examiners executed search warrants on his third-floor office suite downtown, they uncovered a paper trail that read like a masterclass in corporate desperation. Greg hadn't just defaulted on his $1,100,000 commercial bridge loan on the Riverfront Development Project. He had been systematically embezzling client capital across 4 private investment funds for over 18 months. He had used new client deposits to pay off short-term interest penalties, forged quarterly account statements, and pledged non-existent assets to satisfy institutional margin calls. He was 3 days away from a formal federal indictment when he brought those 3-foot hydraulic bolt cutters to Unit 114 at Oak Ridge Secure Storage. He was formally indicted on 14 felony counts, including grand larceny, breaking and entering a secure commercial facility, criminal possession of stolen securities, aggravated identity theft, and corporate wire fraud. His defense team attempted to file a petition for pre-trial bail, citing his standing in the regional business community and offering a secondary lien against his leased vehicle. The presiding magistrate took one look at the evidence presented by Sergeant Vance, the 4K security footage from Oak Ridge Storage, Ray Miller's computerized gate access log, and the directional audio recording of the porch confrontation, and denied bail entirely. Greg was remanded to the county correctional facility to await formal trial. Clara's legal trajectory took a different, deeply painful path. Because she had not physically wielded the bolt cutters herself and possessed no prior criminal record, state prosecutors offered her a formal plea agreement. If she provided a complete, unreserved deposition detailing Greg's financial collapse, the forged power of attorney paper, and the planning behind the forced estate release, the state would reduce her charge from first-degree grand larceny to secondary misdemeanor of a felony and conspiracy to commit property fraud. Her attorney, a sharp, gray-haired criminal defense lawyer retained through what remained of her personal savings, called me on a damp Tuesday morning in early December, asking if I would be willing to meet with Clara in a private consultation room at the county courthouse before her formal plea hearing. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after hanging up the phone, staring out at the frost-dusted driveway where the box truck had sat 4 weeks prior. 35 years of supervising corrections evidence vaults had taught me that once a chain of custody is compromised by dishonesty, you don't pretend the broken seal never happened. You acknowledge the damage, you document the loss, and you enforce the rules that keep the rest of the vault safe. But Eleanor's memory lived in every room of this cottage. The memory of a mother who had spent 34 years hoping her daughter would grow into a woman of honor and strength. I drove my pickup truck down to the county courthouse on a cold, overcast morning, the heater blowing warm air against my boots. The consultation room was small, stark, and smelled of commercial disinfectant and stale coffee. Clara sat on the far side of a scarred oak table, wearing a plain gray county jumpsuit, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, her face pale, thin, and lined with dark circles around her eyes. She looked up when I walked in, her lower lip trembling violently. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely carrying across the small room. I sat down in the wooden chair across from her, keeping my hands folded together on the oak table. "Hello, Clara," I said quietly. "Dad." "I didn't know he was going to cut the lock," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking under the rough cotton of her jumpsuit. "I swear to God, Dad, I didn't know he brought 3-foot bolt cutters in the truck. Greg told me. He told me you gave him the emergency key code. He said you agreed to let us move the safe to a bank vault downtown for security." I looked at my daughter across the table. "Clara," I said, my voice steady, slow, and absolute. "You stood at the counter window at 6:20 in the morning, and handed the night attendant a forged power of attorney paper with my name printed at the bottom. You watched your husband haul your late mother's heirloom coin chests onto a hydraulic liftgate, and then you brought a lawyer to my front porch to threaten me with a mental incompetency petition." Clara couldn't answer. She sat in the cold light of the room, crying quietly into her hands. "Why didn't you just come to me, Clara?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between us. "Why didn't you sit at the kitchen table and tell me you too were drowning?" "Because Greg said you'd look down on us," she sobbed, her eyes raw and bloodshot as she looked up at me. "He said you always judge his business. He said you cared more about your old records, your storage lockers, and your routine than you ever cared about my lifestyle or my status." I closed my eyes for 3 long seconds, taking a slow, deep breath. "I spent 35 years working late shifts in evidence vaults so you could go to college without a single dollar of debt, Clara," I said softly, opening my eyes to look straight into hers. "I didn't judge Greg because he was ambitious. I judged him because I watched him spend 6 years treating other people's lives, savings, and memories like chips on a roulette table." I stood up from the wooden chair, buttoning my canvas work jacket against the draft in the room. "Your mother left those heirloom coins and those family journals to be remembered," I told her quietly. "The irrevocable family trust I've established will ensure they are preserved and protected long after I'm gone. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life when your sentence is served, Clara. But the front door at the cottage is locked." I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the consultation room, down the marble corridors of the courthouse, and out into the crisp December air. By mid-January, the winter snow had fallen heavy and thick across the valley, coating the stone cottage, the pine trees, and the driveway in a clean, spotless blanket of white. The trial dates were formally set for the spring. Greg Miller faced a mandatory minimum sentence of 14 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. Clara signed her plea agreement, accepting a 2-year sentence at a minimum security facility, followed by 4 years of supervised probation and full financial restitution to the estate court costs. On a bright, clear Saturday morning, Special Agent Sarah Jenkins and Detective Sergeant Richard Vance arrived at Oak Ridge Secure Storage in an official state transport vehicle, escorting a commercial rigging crew. Ray Miller stood at the front gate, wearing his winter coat and holding his clipboard, as the crew guided the transport truck down Corridor B to Unit 114. The roll-up door was raised. With meticulous care, the crew used a hydraulic crane to unload my 600-pound fireproof steel safe, setting it squarely back onto the reinforced concrete floorboards where it belonged. Beside it, they carefully placed Eleanor's mahogany dining set, her velvet-lined wooden coin chests, and my grandfather's World War II service journals, every single item catalogued, verified, and accounted for down to the last piece. I stepped into the unit, opened the digital keypad on the fireproof safe, entered my 6-digit personal combination, and pulled the steel door open. Inside, sitting untouched on the felt-lined top shelf, was the heavy leather binder containing my liquid bearer bond certificates, my land grant deeds, and Eleanor's original marriage certificate. I reached out, touched the cool leather binder, and closed the safe door with a solid, heavy thud. Ray Miller stepped up beside me in the doorway, holding a brand-new, heavy-duty commercial Schlage disc lock made of hardened stainless steel, engineered specifically to resist hydraulic bolt cutters and drill bits. "Here's your new lock, Arthur," Ray said, handing me the heavy steel lock along with 2 fresh keys attached to a solid brass ring. "Custom keyed to your personal master code." I took the new lock, aligned the hardened shackle through the steel door latch of Unit 114, and pushed it home. The heavy steel mechanism engaged with a sharp, crisp, mechanical resistance, a sound that echoed through the quiet concrete corridor like a final judgment. I turned to Ray, Sergeant Vance, and Agent Jenkins. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and warm in the cold morning air, "for keeping the chain of custody unbroken." "That's our job, Arthur," Sergeant Vance smiled, offering a firm handshake. "Take care of yourself." I drove back to my stone cottage under the pale blue winter sky. I walked up the porch steps, unlocked my front door, and stepped into the quiet warmth of my home. In the hallway, the grandfather clock ticked softly. Tick, tack, tick, tack, a steady, unyielding rhythm in the quiet room. I walked into the kitchen, set my keys on the wooden table, and poured a fresh mug of black coffee. I sat by the window, looking out over the white snow covering the backyard, watching the winter birds land on the cedar bird feeder Eleanor had hung years ago. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt the quiet, heavy peace of a man who had spent 35 years managing evidence vaults, a man who understood that when your foundation is tested by greed and deceit, you don't weep over broken padlocks. You hold your ground, you protect what is sacred, and you leave the vault completely secured, unbroken, unshaken, and standing on solid ground.